The Galactic Coalition had stood strong for 12,000 years. 73 different species had come together under one banner of peace and friendship. They had built cities that floated among the stars. They had cured every disease known to their kind. They had created ships that could cross the galaxy in days. They believed that nothing could ever threaten their way of life. They were terribly wrong. The Vorax came from the empty darkness between galaxies. Nobody knew where they had originated or how long they had been traveling through the void. They were not like any species the Coalition had ever encountered. They were part machine and part living creature, a swarm of billions that shared one mind and one terrible purpose. They consumed everything in their path. Planets, moons, space stations, and ships all became food for their endless hunger. They did not negotiate. They did not show mercy. They simply devoured. Admiral Kath Rand stood on the bridge of his command ship and watched the war unfold on the screens before him. His silver skin had turned pale gray from the stress of the past 3 years. His 4 eyes reflected the red warning lights that now covered most of the star map. Each red light was a world that had fallen. Each red light was billions of lives lost forever. The Coalition had sent their finest fleets against the Vorax. They had used weapons that could crack planets in half. They had deployed strategies that had worked for thousands of years against every enemy they had ever faced. Nothing worked. The Vorax learned too quickly. They adapted to every weapon within days. They predicted every strategy before it could be fully deployed. The swarm simply grew larger and hungrier with each world it consumed. Councilor Mira stood beside the Admiral. Her body was made of living crystal that usually glowed with warm light. Now that light had dimmed to almost nothing. She represented the oldest species in the Coalition, beings who had watched stars being born and dying. Even they had never seen anything like this. "We have tried everything," she said quietly. "Our scientists have worked without sleep for years. Our soldiers have fought until they could fight no more. We have sacrificed more than I can bear to count. And still the Vorax come." The other council members sat in silence around the great table. There were beings of every shape and size. Some breathed air, while others breathed methane. Some had fur, and others had scales. Some floated in tanks of water, and others existed as clouds of intelligent gas. All of them shared the same expression of complete despair. They had run out of ideas. They had run out of hope. It was the Keeper of Records who finally broke the silence. He was ancient beyond measure. His body was more machine than flesh now, kept alive by technologies that had been lost to time. Nobody remembered what species he had once belonged to. He had simply always been there, watching and recording everything that happened in the galaxy. "There is one option we have not discussed," his voice crackled through speakers that had not been replaced in centuries. Admiral Kath Rand turned to face him. "We have discussed every option. We have considered every ally, every weapon, every possible strategy, not every option." The Keeper moved slowly toward the star map. His mechanical arm reached out and touched a small yellow sun on the outer edge of the galaxy. A tiny blue planet appeared on the display. "We have not discussed them." Councilor Mira leaned forward to study the planet. It looked unremarkable. Just another world orbiting just another star. This system is inside the exclusion zone. It is marked as forbidden in every navigation database. What species lives there that could possibly help us against the Vorax? "They call themselves humans," the Keeper replied. "They live on the 3rd planet from their sun, a world they call Earth." A murmur went through the council chamber. Several members shifted uncomfortably. Others exchanged glances that carried ancient warnings. "The humans are primitives," Admiral Kath Rand said slowly. "Our records show they have barely managed to reach their own moon. They fight among themselves constantly. They poison their own world with their industries. What could such a species offer us? The keeper was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had dropped to something almost like a whisper. 300 years ago, we sent a ship to observe them. The mission was supposed to last 5 of their years. It lasted 3 days. The crew fled in terror and recommended that we never return. Since that day, their system has been marked with a single warning in every database we control. He pulled up an ancient file. Dust seemed to fall from the data as it loaded onto the screens. Do not engage. Do not provoke. Do not allow them to know they are being watched. Under no circumstances should they be permitted to learn that they are not alone in the universe. The council chamber had gone completely silent. Even the beings who did not breathe seemed to be holding their breath. What happened on that mission? Councilor Myra asked. Her crystalline form was flickering with an emotion that looked very much like fear. The observers studied the humans closely, the keeper explained. They watched them during what the humans called a world war. Their second such war in less than 30 of their years. They witnessed humans killing each other with weapons that sprayed poison into the air. They witnessed humans dropping explosives on cities filled with civilians. And at the end, they witnessed humans split the atom itself and use it to burn 2 entire cities to ash in seconds. Barbaric, someone muttered from the council table. That is not why we fear them, the keeper continued. Many species are violent. Many species wage war. What made the humans different was something else entirely. Something in their biology and their minds that our scientists had never encountered before. He pulled up more data. Medical scans and psychological profiles filled the screens. Humans evolved on a world that is classified as a death world by our standards. Their gravity is crushing. Their temperatures swing from burning heat to freezing cold. Their native animals include predators designed to kill in hundreds of different ways. And yet the humans did not just survive. They conquered their entire planet. They became the dominant species, not through strength or speed or natural weapons, but through something far more dangerous. Admiral Kethran studied the data with growing unease. What quality? The keeper turned to face the council. His ancient eyes held something that might have been respect or might have been terror. They simply refused to die. They refused to give up. They refused to accept that anything is impossible. They will fight when all hope is lost. They will continue when their bodies are broken. They will find ways to win when every logical analysis says they should lose. They are the most stubborn, persistent, and terrifyingly creative species this galaxy has ever produced. He let those words hang in the air. That is why we feared them. That is why we left them alone. And that is why they might be the only ones who can save us now. The Keeper of Records continued his story as the council listened in stunned silence. He told them about the observation mission that had changed everything the Coalition understood about dangerous species. 300 years ago, a ship called the Whisper of Dawn had been sent to study the small blue planet. The crew was made up of the finest scientists and observers the Solvani people had ever produced. They were experts in studying primitive civilizations. They had done this work on hundreds of worlds without incident. They expected Earth to be just another routine mission. The ship arrived during a period the humans called World War II. At first, the observers were fascinated. They watched the humans fight across continents with weapons that seemed crude by galactic standards. Guns that fired metal projectiles. Bombs that fell from aircraft. Ships that battled on the oceans. It was violent but not unusual. Many species went through periods of internal warfare before they matured. Then the observers began to notice things that disturbed them deeply. They watched a human soldier with both legs blown off drag himself across a battlefield to retrieve his weapon so he could keep fighting. They watched pilots crash their planes directly into enemy ships rather than retreat. They watched medics run into gunfire to save wounded friends with no regard for their own lives. They watched prisoners of war endure torture that would kill most species and still refuse to give up their secrets. The lead scientist on the mission was named Vel. She had studied more than 200 species across the galaxy. She had seen violence before. She had seen war before. But she had never seen anything like this. They do not stop, she recorded in her notes. They do not surrender when they should. They do not flee when every rational calculation says they should flee. They continue fighting, long past the point where any other species would accept defeat. It is as if they do not understand that they are supposed to die. The biological data was even more disturbing. The scientists scanned human bodies and found something remarkable. Humans were persistent predators. They had evolved on the plains of their world to chase prey for hours or even days until the prey collapsed from exhaustion. Their bodies were designed to keep going long after other creatures would have stopped. They could lose limbs and survive. They could lose massive amounts of blood and still remain conscious. They could fight through pain that would incapacitate any HFY warrior. Their immune systems attacked diseases with a ferocity that seemed almost personal. They healed from injuries that should have been fatal. They adapted to environments that should have killed them. And then there was their world. Earth was classified as a Category 7 death world. The gravity was 30% higher than galactic average. The atmosphere was corrosive to most species. The temperature swings between seasons were extreme enough to destroy most ecosystems. And the native life forms seemed specifically designed to kill anything that moved. Venomous snakes and spiders, predators with massive teeth and claws, parasites that could eat a body from the inside out, diseases that spread through the air itself, oceans filled with creatures that could swallow a shuttle whole. Even the plants on Earth were often poisonous or covered in thorns. The humans had not just survived on this nightmare world. They had dominated it completely. They had hunted the great predators to near extinction. They had conquered every continent, every climate, every environment their world had to offer. They had built cities and farms and roads across a planet that seemed designed to kill them. Then the mission made its fatal mistake. One of the observation drones malfunctioned. It was a tiny device, no larger than one of the insects that filled the Earth's air. It crashed in a field of grain on a continent the humans called North America. A farmer named Samuel Wright found it while working in his fields. Any other species would have dismissed it as a strange rock or a piece of debris. Samuel Wright did not. He took it back to his home and studied it carefully. He was not a scientist. He had never attended a university. He was simply a man who grew crops to feed his family. But within 6 hours, he had determined that the object was not natural. Within 12 hours, he had figured out that it was not from Earth. Within 2 days, he had reverse-engineered its communication system. The crew of the Whisper of Dawn detected a signal being broadcast from the surface. It was crude and simple, but it was clearly directed at them. The human had figured out they were watching, and he had a message for them. "I do not know who you are," the voice said in a language the translation systems rendered as English. "I do not know where you come from or what you want, but I know you are out there. I know you are watching us, and I want you to understand something very clearly." The farmer's voice was calm and steady. There was no fear in it, only a quiet certainty that made the Sylvani crew feel deeply uncomfortable. "If you come in peace, you will be welcomed. We have always looked up at the stars and wondered if we were alone. We would be glad to learn that we are not. But if you come with bad intentions, if you mean harm to my family or my world, then I want you to know what you will be facing." There was a pause. When the voice continued, it had hardened into something like steel. "We are humans. We have survived ice ages and plagues and famines. We have survived wars that killed millions and disasters that should have wiped us out completely. We have survived everything this universe has thrown at us for 100,000 years. And we are still here. We are still fighting. We are still growing stronger. So, come in peace or do not come at all. But if you come for war, if you come to harm us, then understand this simple truth. We do not give up. We do not surrender. We do not forgive those who threaten our children. And we will hunt you across the stars themselves if that is what it takes to keep our world safe. The message ended. The crew of the Whisper of Dawn stared at each other in horror. They had been discovered by a primitive farmer using technology he should not have been able to understand. And his response had not been fear or worship or curiosity. His response had been a threat. The captain made a decision within minutes. The ship fled the solar system at maximum speed. They did not stop until they had put 3,000 light years between themselves and Earth. The captain's final log entry contained only 6 words. They must never reach the stars. The keeper finished his story and looked around the council chamber. The representatives sat in stunned silence. Even the beings who had lived for thousands of years seemed shaken by what they had heard. That was 300 years ago, he said quietly. We left them alone. We established the exclusion zone. We hoped they would destroy themselves before they developed interstellar travel. We were wrong. They are still there. They are still growing, and now we need them. Admiral Kath Rand took a deep breath. If they are as dangerous as you say, how? Do we know they will help us? How do we know they will not simply see the Virax as someone else's problem? The keeper's mechanical face twisted into something that might have been a smile. Because that farmer told us exactly who they are. They protect their own. They fight for their families. And if we can convince them that the galaxy is worth protecting, that there are innocent lives worth saving, then they will fight for us too. The humans are monsters, Admiral, but they are also heroes. They are both things at once, without contradiction. And that is what makes them the most dangerous and the most valuable species in the universe. The Coalition debated for 3 full cycles. 3 precious cycles during which the Virax consumed 2 more worlds and billions more lives were lost. Some council members argued that contacting the humans was too risky. Others said that any species capable of helping them was worth the danger. In the end, desperation won over fear. They had no other options left. A small diplomatic ship called the Quiet Hope was prepared for the mission. The crew was made up entirely of volunteers who understood they might not return. At its head was Ambassador Yellen Thrace, a Velthri diplomat known throughout the galaxy for her calm nature and her ability to negotiate with even the most difficult species. She had never failed to reach an agreement in her 200 years of service. She hoped that record would continue. The ship approached Earth's solar system slowly and carefully. They broadcast peaceful intentions on every frequency. They made no sudden movements. They did everything possible to appear non-threatening. It did not matter. The moment the Quiet Hope crossed the boundary of the solar system, alarms began flashing. Sensors detected scanning beams sweeping across their hull. Communication channels crackled with incoming signals. And most disturbing of all, the tactical display showed dozens of contacts moving to intercept them. Ambassador Thrace felt her twin hearts beating faster as she studied the readings. The humans had not simply reached for the stars. They had been busy. Satellites orbited their world in thick clusters. Probes explored every planet in their system. Military stations hung in space at strategic positions. And the ships moving toward them were not primitive vessels held together with hope and wire. They were warships, crude by Coalition standards, but clearly designed for combat. A voice cut through the communication system. It was female and carried the absolute authority of someone who was used to being obeyed. Unidentified vessel, This is United Earth Space Command. You have entered restricted space. Identify yourself and state your intentions. You have 60 seconds to comply, or you will be fired upon. Ambassador Thrace responded immediately. She transmitted messages of peace in every language the ship's computers could generate. She explained about the Varax. She explained about the war. She begged for help in saving the galaxy. There was a long pause. Then the voice returned. This is Admiral Catherine Blake of the UESC Defiance. So after 300 years of watching, US from the shadows, after hiding from us and studying us like animals in a cage, now you come asking for assistance. Another pause. I think you had better come down here and explain yourselves in person. An ambassador? Come unarmed. My people do not respond well to threats. The shuttle descended through Earth's atmosphere. Ambassador Thrace pressed her face against the window and watched the world grow larger below her. She had studied every piece of data the Coalition had gathered about humanity, but nothing had prepared her for the reality of their planet. The cities were enormous. They sprawled across the continents in vast networks of buildings and roads and lights. Even from high altitude, she could see vehicles moving along highways and aircraft filling the skies. The humans had not just survived for 300 years. They had multiplied and spread and built with a speed that seemed almost impossible. But what disturbed her most were the military installations. They were everywhere. Bases and shipyards and weapons facilities dotted every continent. The humans had spent 3 centuries preparing for something. And looking at the scale of their preparations, Thrace realized they had been getting ready for this exact moment. They had known the day would come when someone would descend from the stars. And they had made sure they would be ready. The shuttle landed at a military base in a region called Nevada. Armed guards surrounded them the moment the doors opened. The guards were tall and heavily muscled compared to most species Thrace had encountered. They moved with the easy confidence of predators who had nothing to fear. Their eyes watched the alien visitors with curiosity rather than terror. Admiral Catherine Blake met them inside a stark concrete building. She was an older woman with gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen too much. She wore a simple military uniform with no decorations or medals. She did not need symbols to show her authority. It radiated from her like heat from a star. Ambassador Thrace, she said, pronouncing the alien name with surprising accuracy. Please, sit down. We have much to discuss. Thrace settled into a chair that was slightly too large for her body. The Admiral sat across from her with several other human officers. None of them showed any sign of fear or uncertainty. They looked at her the same way they might look at a business partner or a rival. Equal to equal. You say the galaxy is under attack, Admiral Blake began. Tell me everything, Thrace told her. She explained about the Varax and her endless hunger. She showed recordings of battles lost and worlds consumed. She presented data on the billions of lives already extinguished and the trillions more at risk. She held nothing back. There was no point in deception now. When she finished, Admiral Blake was quiet for a long moment. Her officers exchanged glances but said nothing. The only sound was the hum of air circulation systems. Let me make sure I understand, Blake finally said. You have a fleet of thousands of advanced warships. You have technology that makes ours look like stone tools. You have 73 species working together with all their combined knowledge and resources. And you are losing. Yes, Thrace admitted. The Varax adapt to everything we try. They learn our strategies faster than we can change them. They consume our worlds faster than we can defend them. We are facing extinction. And you came to us. Blake's voice was flat. The primitive Deathworlders. You have been hiding from for 3 centuries. The species you warned each other about in whispered conversations. The monsters under the bed. Thrace forced herself to meet the Admiral's gaze. Yes, we came to you because we have no other choice, and because we believe you might be able to help where we cannot. Blake leaned back in her chair. A small smile played at the corner of her lips. 300 years ago, a farmer in Kansas caught one of your spy drones. He sent you a message. Did they tell you what it said? Yes, Thrace replied quietly. He warned you not to come in war. He did more than that. Blake's smile faded. He told you exactly who we are. We are the species that does not know how to give up. We are the species that fights when fighting is hopeless. We are the species that survives no matter what the universe throws at us. She leaned forward again, her eyes locked on the ambassador. Here is what is going to happen. You are going to give us everything. Every piece of data you have on the Varax. Every recording of every battle. Every scientific analysis, every failed strategy, every weapon you have tried. You are going to open your archives and let our people study everything you know. Thrace blinked. You want to study the Varax? Study them, understand them, find their weaknesses. Blake's voice had hardened into something like iron. Your coalition has been fighting this war with rules and protocols and carefully planned strategies. You have been trying to defeat the Varax the civilized way. That is why you are losing. She stood up from her chair and walked to a window that looked out over the desert base. Humanity does not fight civilized wars. We fight to win. We fight dirty when we have to. We use every trick and every tool and every ounce of creativity we possess. We do things that make our enemies afraid to face us. And when we are done, our enemies either surrender or they do not exist anymore. She turned back to face the ambassador. You came here because you needed monsters to fight your war. Congratulations, Ambassador. You found them. Now, let us show you how humans make war. The coalition had expected negotiations to take months. They had prepared elaborate treaties full of promises and conditions. They had assembled teams of lawyers and diplomats to handle the complex discussions. They had anticipated that integrating humanity into the war effort would be a slow and careful process. The humans had other ideas. Within 30 days of first contact, Earth had mobilized for total war. Not a single nation, not a selected military force, but the entire planet. Every factory that had been building cars and televisions and consumer goods converted to producing weapons and ships and equipment. Every university shifted from theoretical research to practical weapons development. Every able-bodied man and woman was given the choice to serve in whatever way they could. Billions volunteered. The coalition observers watched in growing amazement as the humans demonstrated just how quickly their species could adapt. They took apart captured Varax specimens with clinical efficiency. They studied enemy technology with a hunger that bordered on obsession. They tested new weapons day and night, refining and improving with each failure. General Daniel Hayes was placed in command of Earth's Expeditionary Force. He was a tall man with broad shoulders and a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. He had spent 40 years in the military and had fought in conflicts on 3 continents. He was not impressed by alien technology or galactic politics. He cared only about one thing: winning. Show me everything, he told the coalition advisors who had been assigned to help him. Every battle you have lost. Every strategy you have tried. Every weapon that has failed. I want to know exactly how the Varax think and fight and die. The advisors complied. They showed him recordings of massive fleet battles where thousands of coalition ships had been destroyed in hours. They showed him analysis of Varax biology and their ability to adapt to new threats. They showed him projections that predicted the fall of the core worlds within a year. Hayes watched it all without expression. When the presentations were finished, he turned to his staff. I have seen enough. They have been fighting this war like accountants. They calculate acceptable losses and strategic withdrawals and optimal resource allocation. They treat it like a business problem with numbers on a spreadsheet. He pulled up his own display, showing the positions of Earth's newly constructed fleet. We are not going to fight like that. We are going to fight like humans. We are going to be aggressive and unpredictable and absolutely terrifying. We are going to make the Varax regret ever coming to this galaxy. The human fleet launched 6 weeks after first contact. 300 warships, built with brutal efficiency and designed with a philosophy that made the alien observers deeply uncomfortable. Coalition ships were elegant vessels designed to avoid damage. They had multiple layers of shields and sophisticated defensive systems. They were built to retreat and repair when things went badly. They were expensive and irreplaceable, so they were used carefully and conservatively. Human ships were different. They were ugly, angular vessels covered in armor plating and bristling with weapons. They had shields, but they were secondary to the thick metal hulls that surrounded every critical system. They were not designed to avoid damage. They were designed to take damage and keep fighting. They were designed to be lost if necessary, because there were always more ships being built back home. The first engagement occurred at a world called Tethys 4. It had been a coalition, agricultural colony before the Varax arrived. Now it was being slowly consumed by 12,000 enemy bioships that orbited the dying planet. The coalition had sent 3 separate fleets to liberate Tethys 4. All 3 had been destroyed. The swarm was simply too large and too adaptive. Standard military doctrine said the planet was lost. General Hayes sent 40 ships. His officers questioned the decision. Even with human aggression and creativity, 40 ships against 12,000 was not a battle. It was suicide. "Trust me," Hayes replied calmly. "The Varax have never fought humans before. They do not know what we are capable of." The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. The Varax immediately detected them and began moving to intercept. Their swarm intelligence calculated the threat level of 40 small warships against their massive force. The calculation suggested minimal risk. The enemy would be consumed like all the others. Admiral Hayes stood on the bridge of the carrier Perseverance and watched the enemy swarm approaching. His executive officer, Commander Lisa Monroe, stood beside him. Her face was calm despite the impossible odds they faced. 12,000 to 40, she observed quietly. 300 to 1. Hayes nodded slowly. Then it is almost a fair fight. The battle began when the Varax reached weapons range. They launched their standard attack pattern, swarming the human ships with thousands of smaller bioships while the larger vessels hung back. It was the same strategy that had destroyed every coalition fleet sent against them. The human ships did not retreat or try to maintain formation. They accelerated directly into the swarm at full speed. Their weapons fired continuously, not at specific targets, but in wide patterns that filled space with destruction. Ships that would have been considered crippled by coalition standards continued fighting. Vessels that had lost entire sections of their hulls kept their weapons firing until their reactors finally failed. And then, the humans did something the Varax had never seen before. The damaged ships, the ones that could no longer fight effectively, did not try to escape. Instead, they turned toward the largest Varax vessels and accelerated to maximum speed. They rammed directly into the enemy bioships, detonating their reactors on impact. Each suicide run destroyed ships worth 1,000 times their value. The Varax swarm intelligence tried to adapt. It changed tactics and shifted formations. But the humans changed faster. Every time the swarm developed a counter, the human commanders found a new approach. They were creative and unpredictable in ways that the Varax could not calculate. The battle lasted 18 hours. When it was over, 32 human ships had been destroyed. The pilots and crews who survived the initial attacks had fought until their vessels could no longer function, then triggered their reactors to take as many enemies as possible with them. The Varak swarm was annihilated. All 12,000 ships were reduced to drifting wreckage. The Coalition observers who witnessed the battle were speechless. They had never seen anything like it. The humans had lost 80% of their force, but they had won. More importantly, they had made the Varaks pay a price so catastrophic that for the first time since the war began, the enemy advance stopped. The swarm intelligence had encountered something it did not understand. A species that considered mutual destruction an acceptable outcome. A species that would gladly trade their own lives to hurt their enemies. A species that fought with a fury that defied rational calculation. General Hayes recorded a message to Earth after the battle. The Coalition intercepted it and shared it across their communications network. Within hours, every species in the galaxy had heard the words. We lost good people today. Good men and women who knew they were probably going to die and went anyway. They did not go because they wanted to die. They went because they wanted to protect the people they loved and the worlds they cared about. They went because that is what humans do. His voice was tired but steady. The aliens watching us want to know how we do it. How we keep fighting when the math says we should surrender. How we find the strength to charge into certain death with a smile on our faces. I will tell them the same thing I told the Varaks today. He paused. Humanity does not do math. We do spite. We fight because we refuse to let our enemies win. We fight because giving up is not in our nature. And we fight because every single one of us would rather die standing than live on our knees. The message ended. Across the galaxy, species that had lived in fear for years felt something they had almost forgotten. Hope. The humans had arrived. And they were just getting started. The war lasted 3 more years after the Battle of Tethys 4. 3 years of grinding. Brutal combat that changed everything the galaxy understood about warfare and about the strange species from the small blue planet. The humans did not simply fight the Varaks. They hunted them. They studied the swarm intelligence patterns and learned to predict where the enemy would strike next. They traced Varaks' communications back to their source and launched attacks on breeding worlds deep in the void between galaxies. They developed weapons specifically designed to cause maximum pain to the swarm mind, because they had discovered that the Varaks could feel suffering, and suffering made them hesitate. Admiral Kathran watched a human strike team deploy one of these weapons against a Varak's hive ship. It was a biological agent that dissolved the enemy vessel slowly from the inside out. The screams of the dying swarm echoed across every communication frequency. It was horrible and efficient and deeply disturbing. Is that not cruel? He asked Colonel Marcus Stone, the commander of the strike team. Stone looked at him with eyes that had seen too much death to feel anything anymore. Cruelty means we care about their suffering. We do not. We care about results. The Varaks do not show mercy to the worlds they consume. Why should we show mercy to them? Kathran had no answer. The Coalition forces learned to fight alongside the humans, adopting their tactics and their mindset. Ships that once would have retreated now stayed in battle until they could fight no more. Commanders who had once calculated acceptable losses now focused only on victory at any cost. It was brutal and terrifying, and it worked. The Coalition also saw another side of humanity. During those 3 years, they watched human medics sprint across active battlefields to save wounded aliens they had never met. They watched soldiers share their food with starving refugees from species they could not name. They watched pilots volunteer for suicide missions to cover the retreat of civilian transports full of children. They watched an entire carrier group sacrifice itself to buy time for a Velthari colony ship to escape, dying so that strangers might live. The humans were monsters. The humans were heroes. They were both things at the same time, and that contradiction was the most confusing and amazing thing about them. Ambassador Thrace spent those 3 years working alongside the human commanders. She learned their language and their customs. She shared meals with them and mourned their dead beside them. She came to understand that what had seemed like contradictions were actually two sides of the same coin. We protect what we love, General Hayes explained to her one evening after a particularly brutal battle. And we destroy what threatens what we love. It is not complicated. We would burn the galaxy to ash to keep our families safe. But we would also die to protect the families of complete strangers. Because once we decide someone is worth protecting, we protect them with everything we have. The final battle came above the world the Virax had made their home in this galaxy. The combined fleet, now operating under human tactical doctrine and human commanders, faced the last great swarm in a confrontation that would decide the fate of everything. Admiral Catherine Blake commanded the joint forces from the bridge of the Defiance. She had grown old in the war years. Her hair was white now, and her body carried scars that would never heal. But her eyes still held the same fire that had burned when she first greeted the Coalition ambassadors all those years ago. All ships, she broadcast across the fleet. 3 years ago, the galaxy came to us because they were afraid. They were right to be afraid. We are terrifying. We are violent and unpredictable, and absolutely unwilling to accept defeat. The enemy swarm filled the tactical display. Millions of bioships arranged in patterns that hurt the eye to look at. The largest Virax force ever assembled. The last defense of a species that had consumed countless civilizations across millions of years. But we are also the species that came to the stars, not because it was easy, but because it was hard. We are the species that stands up when every logical calculation says we should stay down. We are the species that refuses to give up, no matter what the odds. The fleet began to move forward. Human ships and coalition ships side by side, flying into certain death with steady hands and determined hearts. We are humans. And today, we are going to remind the universe why that matters. The battle raged for 6 days. Ships on both sides were destroyed in numbers too large to count. The void between the stars filled with wreckage and debris and the frozen bodies of the fallen. Every hour brought new losses and new sacrifices. Every hour tested the limits of what any species could endure. But the humans did not break. And the coalition forces, fighting alongside them, found strength they did not know they possessed. On the 7th day, the Virax swarm shattered. For the first time in their million-year existence, they fled. The great swarm mind retreated into the void between galaxies, broadcasting a single message on every frequency as it disappeared. We will not return. This galaxy is yours. We are sorry. The war was over. The galaxy was saved. And humanity, the primitive death worlders that the Coalition had feared to approach, had become the most powerful force in the known universe. 1 year after the victory, the Coalition reformed with humanity as a full member. Ambassador Thrace presented a formal commendation to the human delegation in a ceremony attended by representatives of every surviving species. You asked us once why we watched you for 300 years without making contact, she said, her crystalline form shimmering with emotion. We told you we were afraid. That was true, but it was not the whole truth. She paused, looking at the humans assembled before her. We also hoped. We hoped that one day we would need heroes. And we hoped that when that day came, the monsters in the dark would turn out to be the good kind. We were right. General Hayes accepted the commendation with a tired smile. He had grown old in the war, his hair white and his body worn. but his eyes still held the fire that had burned in Samuel Wright 300 years before. "We did not fight for glory or conquest," he said quietly. "We fought because there were innocent people dying and evil that needed stopping. That is what humans do. We protect the weak. We punish the cruel. And we never give up." He looked out at the assembled representatives of dozens of species. Many of them had lost worlds and loved ones in the war. Many of them still feared the humans even as they honored them. He understood that fear. He respected it. "The Voraks were afraid of you," he continued. "They saw 73 species working together and thought you would be easy prey. They did not know about us. Now they do. And now so does everyone else who might think about threatening this galaxy." He raised the crystalline trophy that Thrace had given him. It caught the light of alien suns streaming through the council chamber windows. "So let this be a message to every empire and every force that might consider harming the innocent. Earth remembers its friends, and Earth never forgives its enemies. We are humans. We are monsters and heroes both, and we will stand guard over this galaxy for as long as we exist." The chamber erupted in applause. Tentacles and claws and wings and crystalline chimes all joined together in a celebration of survival and hope. The war was won. The Voraks were gone, and humanity had taken its place among the stars, protectors of a galaxy that had once feared them. They were still terrifying. They were still unpredictable and violent and stubborn beyond all reason. But they were also kind and brave and willing to die for strangers. The galaxy had learned to fear humanity. Now it was learning to love them too. And somewhere in the void between galaxies, the Vorak swarm fled ever onward, carrying a warning to any other species that might consider approaching the Milky Way. There were monsters there. Beautiful, terrible, wonderful monsters. And they would never stop fighting for what they loved.